What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning back into another video. Today's video, I want to talk about the team behind me here, the Florida Panthers, and kind of talk about the run here in the playoffs because it's been absolutely spectacular. But there's been a couple things I've seen said about this team, and it kind of got me thinking. As you can already tell by the title, the main topic I want to talk about here is, are the Florida Panthers really underdogs? Are they still underdogs? Should they have been considered underdogs? And when should they have been not considered underdogs? So I want to give my opinion on this. This really kind of got me thinking when Matthew Tkachuk last night, I guess 2 days ago at the time I'm uploading this, when they beat the Carolina Hurricanes in 4, he said, "We are underdogs, and even in the finals, we are still going to be underdogs." And that got me thinking, are they really going to be underdogs into the finals? So of course, if you guys are new to the channel, it would mean a ton to me if you guys subscribed and liked the video if you enjoyed. Now let's get into it. So let's start by talking about the Florida Panthers run because it's been absolutely insane. So Florida Panthers, let's talk about their run here. They barely made it into the playoffs, like barely. Literally like the last team possible to make the playoffs. They did so, and then they went up against the best regular season team in NHL history. Then they beat them, moved on to play the Toronto Maple Leafs in round 2. Yes, round 2. I know, surprising. And then they went on to beat the Carolina Hurricanes in 4 in the Eastern Conference Finals. So let's talk about this team as kind of underdogs. Let's talk about Florida and look at them through the scope of underdogs. Let's go back to the beginning when they first get into the playoffs. I think you could take any team, whether somehow this team is like the second best team in the league and they're going up against Boston. No matter who it was, that team that Boston was facing was going to be underdogs. But obviously it was amplified and just even stronger when you look at Florida barely making the playoffs. Nobody in their right mind had Florida actually winning that series. I would even go as far as to say majority of Florida fans didn't even think they were going to win that series. Like, they probably went into it just thinking there's no hope, but it'd be really sick if they won it. But really they didn't have like a lot of confidence, which, I mean, rightfully so. Like, that's just crazy when you see the kind of run that they ended up going on, and how are you supposed to predict as a fan that they were going to do that? So of course, Florida are underdogs in that series. They ended up prevailing from that series and going on to win and beat the Boston Bruins. Absolute insane underdog story, like, no doubt about it. But then they go in to play Toronto, and in my opinion, I think this is where them as underdogs could have started to fade, and I'll explain myself. I could understand if some of you guys look at just the teams in general and think Toronto's better and that the Florida Panthers are still underdogs in this case. But I'm going to give you a reason as to why I think the Florida Panthers maybe weren't underdogs in this series. And a lot of people were just looking at Toronto and seeing their team and thinking this is a shoo-in win. When if you think about it, I don't think it was as much of a shoo-in. So first off, you got to look at how Bobrovsky played towards the end of that series against Boston. He started to absolutely turn up and was one of the sole reasons why the Florida Panthers were able to get past the Boston Bruins in the first place. Then you got to look at Toronto, a team that hasn't made it out of the first round in such a long time. Finally get over that hurdle. They're now almost like an unknown entity. Like, you don't know how they are going to play once getting through that first round. Obviously, we got firsthand experience and got to see how they played after getting out of the first round, but we didn't know ahead of time how this team was going to handle and how they were actually going to play after getting out of the first round. So I think that unknown variable of Toronto in that getting out of the first round, and then seeing this team, like, so Toronto fans, let's go back here a second. Let's talk about this for a second because I need to bring this up. Toronto fans say they would rather play Florida, and that's cool and all. Like, sure, I understand why, but who would you rather play? The best team in regular season history of the NHL or the team that beat them in Game 7? Either way, you're facing a really good team, and I think once Florida beat Boston in that first round, they kind of lost some of their underdog, and they instantly took down the top team in the playoffs, or at least were projected to be the top team in the playoffs, and they instantly are not the worst team. Like, Florida's not the worst team at that case. If you can beat the best team, you're clearly not the worst. I think they become no longer underdogs. It's hard because I don't want to say Toronto were underdogs, because if you look at the rosters on paper, I think Toronto maybe had a stronger roster. So it's hard to say if they were underdogs. but I definitely don't think Florida were like heavy underdogs in that first round, or in that second round, sorry. I think it was actually a lot closer than you may think. I think a lot of people were going recency bias, Toronto finally getting over the first round. Florida, they were looking at the seed, saying Florida's 8th seed, definitely underdog, but like 8th seed beat the first seed, so I don't think Florida's 8th seed anymore, even though they still kind of are. I hope that makes sense. And then let's talk about the conference final against the Carolina Hurricanes, because I think a lot of people also went into that thinking as the Florida Panthers as underdogs. But think about this. The Carolina Hurricanes are currently 0-12 in Eastern Conference Finals. If you look at that stat and then see they're playing a red-hot Florida team that beat Boston and whooped Toronto in Game 5, I would argue Carolina's almost a team on their back heel, almost a team that's an underdog. They have more to prove. I would have argued that Carolina was almost the underdog in that series. Florida came into it beating two really good teams and just almost dominated, like they dominated Toronto, and then they beat Boston, and I think they come into it on an absolute high and definitely not an underdog anymore. And then going into the finals, sure, they might play Vegas. I don't know. The game is on literally right now, the time I'm recording this, and Vegas is up 1-0 in the first period. I have the game on right in front of me. So they're probably playing Vegas, most likely. I still don't think Florida goes into that as underdogs. Florida has played better teams. Honestly, they should have had a harder run to the finals, but they've made the Eastern Conference Final in the second round against Toronto look easy. And I think that just shows how good they're playing right now and how good they are, that it's so hard to look at this team and say they're underdogs still. Like, if anything, I think they might be the favorite. At least in my opinion, they're the favorite. So let me know what you guys think about this. I really wanted to make a video about this when I saw Matthew Tkachuk talk about them being underdogs in the finals. And I think people just look at that 8 seed and held on to it the whole way, when you also have to look at the teams that they beat in order to get to the position they're in. I think that speaks of volumes to this Tampa Bay team, or to this Florida Panthers team story, and is a big reason as to why I just don't think you can look at them as underdogs anymore. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you guys are new to the channel, it'd mean a lot if you guys subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed, let me know down in the comments your guys' opinion, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.